welcome. Okay, I just had to get myself situated. So, the title of this video probably intrigued you, or maybe you just like watching my videos. Either way, glad to have you here. Welcome to a Kicking It with Bookishrealm chat. So, if you did not know, I used to host these sprints. Well, they weren't really sprints. I mean, they were intended to be sprints, but they were never sprints because we would get to chatting about different things that were happening in the Booktube community, in the publishing community. We would have these really in-depth and great conversations. And I haven't done one of those in a while, and it's really because of the fact that I definitely did a lot in December. I did a whole lot in December, and January was my month to kind of pull the reins back a little bit, go to bed at a decent time, really practice some serious self-care and focus on me a little bit. So we haven't had one of those chats and one of those sprints in a while. We've had sprints and we've had some discussions, but I haven't organized a Monday night sprint and discussion in a pretty long time. Actually, it's been a minute since I've done one. So I thought that in the meantime, until I'm able to kind of figure out my schedule for the next few months, I think that it would be cool if maybe once or twice a month I did these basically Kicking It with Me videos where I talk about a topic that specifically we have explored before, that I kind of want to talk about a little bit more, or maybe something that has come up that's been brought to my attention. So I thought that this would kind of be a good substitute for now until I'm able to kind of think about how I want to structure that stuff. And I used to do discussion videos on Booktube quite a bit, and sometimes it's good to mix it up and have a little bit of a discussion about some things that we see in the community, or just our own thoughts and ideas about things that we are passionate about. So as you can see by the title of this video, I am here to talk about our obsession with numbers. I put our in parentheses, so it should say Booktube's and then our obsession with numbers, because anytime I engage in any of these conversations, I don't want to make it appear as though I am not a part of the problem to a degree, because specifically with this topic, I am a part of the problem. And I didn't really think about how much I was a part of the problem until I was having a discussion on some sprints that I believe I did on Monday. I think that's when I did the sprints. I'm not sure. It was Sunday that I did sprints, and this conversation kind of came up. And I want to preface this because it's just a thing. I feel like we talked about this on Mara's live this week about the fact that sometimes it is, needed to preface to say that this is not an attack on anybody. I am clearly saying that I am a part of the problem, but I think it's a conversation that we need to have because I'm seeing it more frequently, and I have actually started doing it myself. And I'm kind of wondering the amount of influence and pressure that we've been placing on other members in the community as well as those who are viewers. So let's go ahead and jump in. I am literally going off the top of my head. That's how I work best, except for that last review I did because I was multitasking. Usually when I talk, I say what comes to mind, and that's where we go. So when I say Booktube's obsession with numbers, our obsession with numbers, I'm not talking about clicks and subscriber counts. I'm talking about Booktube's obsession with reading numbers. So I don't know how many of you all have seen it lately, but we all, including myself, and maybe not everyone, but I know a lot of people, including me, have been engaging in these videos where we say, I read X amount of books each month. Now, I'm going to preface this also by saying that this is not to shame anyone that reads a lot, because we all read a ton. I think that Booktube in itself is a very just niche community, and the amount that we consume in terms of books is not the normality for the rest of society that is not a part of Booktube. So this is not to shame anybody that reads a lot, because I read a lot as well. This is kind of an exploration of attempting to figure out how do those titles influence others who may be a part of this community and others who may be a part of this community in a viewing perspective, and how that changes whether people trust or do not trust our reviews. And this is also kind of a preface to a conversation that I'll be having with Bethany and Mara next week, which I will link that live show that's going to happen down below in the description box. So as I was saying, we're seeing a lot of videos now, including mine. I just literally did one where I said I did Vlogmas and read 42 books in December. Granted, that's something to be super proud of, but it made me start thinking every time that I do something like this, whenever I put the number of books that I've read in a month, it is something for me to be proud of, because I think that that is a good accomplishment. I think that that's something that no one should be ashamed of. I don't think anybody should be derailed for either reading a lot in a month or reading a little in a month. But it makes me think about how I'm impacting those who watch me. And I kind of got that feeling when I see some comments where people are like, I wish I could read as much as you, or you read all, what you read in 1 month is all I read in a year. And it made me start thinking about the fact that I hope that by doing that, people don't feel like what we're doing is the norm, because it's not. And that's my opinion. I think the average human probably reads maybe 1 to 15 books a year, if that. So for us to be cranking out even 10 books a month is not the normal thing that most of human society engages in. And then it started to make me think, like, are we setting unrealistic expectations? And once again, I'm gonna always circle back down to the fact that I don't think it's a bad thing to read a lot, because I read a lot as well. But I wonder how much people feel pressured to read a lot. And this is where you kind of come in as viewers. When you see videos like this, when you see even me post a video where I say I have read 42 plus books in a month, do you feel pressured to keep up with that? Does it become a thing where we feel like we have to keep up with the Joneses? Like we have to max out the number of books we're reading a month in order to keep up with the latest Booktube trend? Is that a thing? And then it then holds up this huge overarching question of whether we are now reading because we're reading for the numbers, or are we reading for enjoyment and pleasure? And I think sometimes those lines can be blurred. It's not that way for everybody. Some people read and that's their escape, especially, like, I can say that, I can verify that just with myself. Like, reading is definitely my point of escape. It's the point where I just, you know, I get lost in it. It is my safe space. It is a method that I was actually taught to cope with a lot of things. I am not an avid TV watcher. I don't have the TV on a lot, especially because of the baby. Like, I don't want her to be engaged with TV that much. So even on the weekends, like, we don't really have the TV on like that. So then that creates a balance where there's more things to do. You have to take into consideration that we are in the middle of a global pandemic. It's not like a lot of us are going out on the weekends and hanging out with friends and family and partying and stuff like that. So there are certain external factors, I think, that also elevate those numbers. But it always makes me weary sometimes, because I feel like, do people feel pressured to keep up with me or anybody else that reads a large amount of books? And do I give off this impression that I am reading for clicks instead of reading for enjoyment? And then there becomes this really, really murky line, which then turns into, am I really reading everything that I'm reading? Am I giving authentic reviews, or am I reading just to say that I've read something? And I think that broadens out into a whole different conversation of, what is your purpose as a booktuber? Like, do you see yourself as a reviewer? Do you want people to trust your reviews? Because referencing back to what we'll talk about a little bit more in the live with Mara and Bethany, is the conversation that people don't believe that we read as much as we do. So some of us who actually do read this much don't believe that we actually do read this much. And I think that it has to do with the fact that the numbers that people see in terms of stats and reading and the number of books that have been read each month it's astronomical. And it's like, there's no way that you're reading this much and retaining. And that kind of goes back to a tweet that someone had made. I don't even know, because I kind of briefly saw it and I'm not going to get into it, where someone was saying that you're not reading and retaining anything. And then that brings up the debate of, well, I'm reading to escape, I'm reading for joy, I don't have to learn something from everything that I read. I think that part of me understands this correlation as to why people see these numbers and then they don't think that we're actually reading the books that we read, and that we actually are just doing it for clicks. So for me, it's a very, very complicated topic, and I think that it's a topic that we definitely as a community need to explore more, because while I don't find myself reading for the sake of numbers, I just can't read for the sake of numbers. Like, I literally just don't have the time to read for the sake of numbers, because of the fact that I literally just read when I have a chance, and if it doesn't get done, it just doesn't get done. But I can see how that can be a thing where people end up feeling super pressured to start reading lots and lots and lots of stuff, just because it's this whole attitude of keeping up with the Joneses and wanting to match the numbers that they see other people match numbers with. And I think sometimes too, it lends to disrespecting a lot of specific books and genres. So I'm gonna insert kind of my own personal goal that I talked a little bit about in my 2021 reading goals, is that I said that I was going to read picture books this year, and that I was going to count and catalog my picture books, because I read a lot of picture books. I read a lot of picture books every single year. I just don't review them because I had this fear of my numbers exploding and people saying that it wasn't fair, or it was not really actually a thing that it wasn't actually a thing that I was doing because picture books are short, and that's the reason why my numbers were so skewed. And it's sad that things like comics, single issue comics, comics in general, manga, and picture books get kind of a slight bad rep because of the fact when people have read so much, it's like, well, they really truly haven't read a lot. And for me, it's just one of those things where it almost comes to a point where it's like, why does it matter? Reading is reading at the end of the day. Why does it matter? Why does it matter to anyone? I don't want that to come across as we shouldn't be talking about this in a critical way. We shouldn't be looking at it in a critical way, because I do firmly believe that when you take this platform and you get a certain amount of followers, or even just when you have a following in general, you have the ability to influence people. The things that you do, the things that you say can sway people. So for me, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't want to come across as if it shouldn't matter, but in the same regard, it's one of those things like, does it really matter if someone's reading 200 picture books in a year, and that counts as, you know, in addition to the other 300 books, they've read 500 books? Like, does it really matter? Like, should we stop emphasizing how many books we read? I mean, I know that we do, because it's a thing that we do in terms of like keeping stats and seeing how our reading changes, but numbers seem to be such a tricky thing. They seem to be a tricky thing to have a conversation about. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you, in the midst of filming this video, I am really struggling to come up with some coherent thoughts about how I really feel about this, because you can kind of see both sides of the perspective, where you see like, okay, don't discourage people from reading all that they want, because you don't know what someone may be going through, and this may be their coping mechanism. These books may be their safe space. And then you see the other side where it's like, well, do we need to emphasize on numbers so much, considering that this could impact groups who are not reading as much, and they may feel like they need to keep up and they have to read this much? Because I've had people say, oh, I have to read this much books in order to be a booktuber, and that's not true. None of that is true. I think it then shifts into, you have to read a certain type of book, and the books have to be a certain type of length, and if they're not, and you're reading a lot of those, and they shouldn't really count because they're not this length. And I think that for me, if you're reviewing your stuff, I really don't care. But then that's an issue, because everybody is not a reviewer. Everybody doesn't want to be a reviewer, and that is okay too. But I really would like us to maybe start talking about ways in which we can either have this conversation, or we can start thinking about the ways that our obsession, because it has become an obsessive thing now. It has become a part of our titles and our videos, and I will always say our, because you can go back through my videos and you can see where I've read 20 books, I read 39 books, I read 42 books. And then it's so sad too that I find myself even giving an explanation even when I've read that many books. I'm like, oh yeah, but the reason why that number is so high is because I've read picture books. like, that in itself shouldn't be a thing, because then I'm shaming myself for having read that much, but then not having read that much of a certain type of book. And I think that in itself too is a problem. And I'm not here with an answer. This is the funny thing about whenever I have these discussions, is that I don't always have an answer. And a lot of times when I have these discussions, it's actually me working through how I feel and things that I've seen while on camera, like real life, me figuring these things out. I think that it is detrimental to both sides. I think we start to cage ourselves in, and it's so fascinating to me because we always forget that this is not it's not as huge of a community as we think it is. Booktube is a big community. There are people who are booktubers and I'm like, who is that? And then every day we're getting new people. There's nothing wrong with that. But reading itself is not this huge thing. Most of us probably could sit right now in front of a camera and say, count on two hands how many family members we know that read. I come from a family where I only know two people in my family who like to read. We were just talking about the live Brie had brought up from the Lot Booktician. She had brought up a great point where we also have this assumption that everybody comes from a family of readers, that we've grown up reading, that we have these parents or guardians or whoever was an adult in our life at the time that we were kids, instilling in us the love for reading. And that's not true. It's not true. It's not true across the board. A lot of us don't come from those backgrounds. So just knowing that this is not a thing that everyone engages in, a thing that everyone is interested in, it makes things, it puts things in perspective is what I'm trying to say. It puts things in perspective because I think that the numbers make viewers feel like, especially viewers, and I think some of us as peers within this community, we feel like we have to keep up with each other, and then we tell viewers that they have to keep up with us, not directly saying it, but in our actions we tell viewers to keep up with us. And for what? For what? Like, it's not normal. None of this is normal. What we do is not normal. The amount that we read is not normal. How we review is not normal. It is not a normal action that everyone takes. I wish that it was. I wish that globally it was a thing that was normal. I can't tell you how many people want to read and are not even literate because they don't have access to the tools and the resources that they need to be literate. It's just, literacy in itself is not as widespread, I think, as people think it is. It very much so is not. And I know that firsthand through my job, that literacy is not as normal as you think it is. So I think one of the most important things that you can remember when having conversations like this is that we're human, and this is not a discussion in which people are bad for not reading a lot and people are not good for reading 30 books a year. I don't think attributing those words to the amount in which you read is a very, very dangerous discord in my personal opinion. But I think it's an interesting thing to look at. I think it's an interesting conversation to have. And as we always say, we can't tell people what to do. You can't tell people how much to read. You can't tell people you can't read a lot of books because people feel like they have to read a lot of books too. That's not the way to have this conversation. I think that it's trying to engage and understand the amount of influence that we do have over people, and trying to be as transparent as possible as to why numbers look the way that they do, and also being transparent and not discouraging people from checking out different arenas of books. I think that's probably one of my hugest takeaways from thinking about something like this, is that counting picture books or single issue comics does not mean that you're cheating. And it's almost turned into this competition where it's like, oh, well, you have all these books, but your page count is low. So what? If I could get 5 of my teens to pick up a picture book and read it, or a single issue comic, like, that's a blessing. So I think it's this balance of you know, read what you want, how you want, and the amount that you want, and don't feel ashamed for it, and don't feel pressured to keep up with anyone. What you read is what you read, and you should be proud of whatever you've read. And I really do appreciate the booktubers who do say that, who say stuff like, you know, I read a lot. I read a lot this month, but if you read one book, that's okay. If you read nothing this month, that's okay too. It doesn't matter how much I have read or how much it doesn't make me a better reader or a better person or more well-read than you because I read 300 books this year and you only read 20. I don't want the conversation about the amounts that we read in terms of those who do read a lot to be associated with elitism, that because people read a lot or they read 300 plus books a year, that means that they're more well-read or they're better readers. That's not true. You don't know how they're framing their time. You don't know what reading does for them. And for the people who only read 20, 30 books, hell, I mean, you did better than the average person. I mean, that's a blessing. I think that it's a lot grayer than what we give it credit for, and that it is not a binary of black and white, good and bad, elite, not elite, well-read, not well-read. And I also think that too, I don't think that numbers should be the equivalent on whether someone is sufficiently reviewing or able to review or has thoroughly retained something from books. Some people read because they just need the escape and they're not reading to learn this whole new skill. I mean, shoot, if you read something, you're taking something away from it, even if it's joy. That's something. That's something that you're taking away. And I do understand too, like, you know, the reviewer aspect. I fall more on the reviewer end but that's what I want to do. I want to read for critical purposes, and I have made the decision to read and review every book that I pick up from here on out. But that's me. That's what I choose to do. But I can't take away someone's choice to read because they need to escape from this world, because this world is a shit show. Let's all be honest. I mean, we're still in the middle of a global pandemic. I don't care how you flip it, twist it, turn it. There are people who are still struggling mentally with a lot of things that are happening in the world. So with that being said, I don't have an answer. I really don't. I wish I had an answer. I don't have an answer. I just thought I would get on here and kind of spit my thoughts a little bit because I'm interested in seeing what other people think. I've seen some people's thoughts regarding reading more and how much people are reading, and it's this constant focus on numbers. I think Yanni made an excellent point where Yanni was saying in the chat that whenever we talk about reading more, we always talk about numbers. We don't ever explore. More we think is the equivalent of numbers, and we never think about more being the equivalent of something else. And it was hard for me even to grasp what Yanni meant by that. I was like, I kept reading this sentence over and over again. I was like, well, yeah, because more means numbers. And that's not true. But because we're so framed and hardwired to think more is the equivalent of numbers, that's all we think about when we say, well, we want to read more. And that means I want to get my numbers up. So as I said before, I hope my thoughts are somewhat coherent, because this was very stream of consciousness if you couldn't tell. But I'm hoping that maybe we as a community can kind of reevaluate what we're doing. Reevaluate our obsession with this numbers, with how much we're reading, this behavior that we have in which we must list out how many books we've read in a month, and what does that do to us as a community, and what does that do to viewers who are a part of this community. So what I really want to know in the comments is, how do you feel when you see videos like mine? Because like I always say, I've done it, where I've said stuff like, oh, I've read 42 books this month. Like, how does that make you feel as a viewer, or if you're part of the Booktube community? Do you feel pressured by that? Or does it make you feel like you're not reading as much? I really just want to know, like, what are your perspectives? Because I read a lot, so I don't know if I really get the impact that some other people may get when they see stuff like that. And does it lessen your trust in those of us who read a lot? Do you really feel like we're reading? Do you really feel like we're engaging with the text? Do you feel like we're giving sufficient reviews? So a lot of questions. Answer what you want to answer. I hope that you have enjoyed this video. If there's any other topics that you would like to see me kind of give my stream of consciousness thoughts about, kind of chat it up about, let me know in the comment box below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in seeing more content, click the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. And if you're looking to support this channel or follow me on social media, all the links will be down in the description box below. And I'll be back with another video. Not tomorrow. I was about to say I'll be back with another video tomorrow. That's a lie. That's the biggest lie I was about to tell. I'll be back with another video soon. Bye, y'all.